The California sun cuts through Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across the weathered face of America's most trusted actor. Tom Hanks sits alone in his study, surrounded by the golden sentinels of his achievement. 2 Academy Awards, 7 Emmys, the AFI Lifetime Achievement Statuette. At 69, his once boyish features have surrendered to time, the crinkles around his eyes deeper now, mapping decades of laughter and private pain. His fingers, slightly trembling, trace the edge of an old typewriter, one of hundreds in his famous collection. The machine that once clacked with the optimism of "You've got mail" now sits silent, a relic of an analog world that, like Hanks himself, has been forced to evolve. "I've played so many ordinary men facing extraordinary circumstances," he murmurs to no one, "but nobody prepared me for outliving your relevance." The man who captivated generations, who survived a Pacific island with only a volleyball for company, who landed a crippled spacecraft and saved a bridge from Cold War tensions, now faces his most daunting role, himself, in the third act of a life where Hollywood's adoration is cooled, where personal losses accumulate, and where legacy questions haunt even the most decorated careers. But to understand how Tom Hanks arrived at this moment of reckoning, we must return to the beginning, to a childhood fractured by divorce, to a young man who found in acting not just a career, but salvation. This is the untold story of Thomas Jeffrey Hanks, a man whose unparalleled ability to portray American decency on screen masks a private journey marked by abandonment, insecurity, and the crushing weight of being the nicest guy in Hollywood. Beyond the beloved films and the carefully maintained public image lies a more complex truth: how a boy from a broken home transformed himself into America's dad, and the personal cost of maintaining that facade for over 40 years. If this story moves you, tap like so others may discover the man behind the carefully constructed myth, a man whose genuine goodness and profound sadness have always been two sides of the same weathered coin. Amos Hanks packed his bags in 1960, leaving behind a confused 4-year-old Tom and his 3 siblings in the wake of a splintering marriage. The family unit that should have provided stability for young Thomas Jeffrey Hanks, born July 9, 1956 in Concord, California, instead became a landscape of constant upheaval. Within just 7 years, Tom would endure 10 different homes and 3 stepmothers as he shuttled between his father's and mother's new households. "I was a child of divorce in an era when divorce was really weird," Hanks would later recall, his words carefully measured, masking deeper waters. "I didn't come from a broken home so much as I came from a construction site." This perpetual displacement bred in young Tom a chameleon-like adaptability, a survival skill that would later serve his acting career but extract a heavy personal toll. In each new school, in each new neighborhood, he became whatever version of himself might be accepted. The class clown, the eager-to-please new kid, the boy who would rather make you laugh than let you see his pain. By his early teens, Tom had developed a protective shell of humor and affability, traits that would eventually endear him to millions, but began simply as armor against rejection. The theaters of his high school became sanctuaries from his fragmented home life. On stage, playing other people made more sense than being himself. There, within the safety of scripted lines and directed emotions, he found the stability his childhood had denied him. "I was a geek, a spaz," Hanks has admitted. "I was horribly, painfully, terribly shy. At the same time, I was the guy who'd yell out funny captions during film strips, but I didn't get into trouble. I was always a real good kid and pretty responsible." This duality, the responsible, good-hearted boy cloaking inner turmoil with humor, would become the template for his adult personality and many of his most iconic roles. The seeds of Forrest Gump, of Jim Lovell, of Captain Miller were planted in these formative years of practiced likability and hidden wounds. In 1974, a pivotal moment arrived when Hanks attended the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival in Cleveland. Watching a production of The Taming of the Shrew, the 18-year-old Hanks experienced an epiphany that would alter his life's trajectory. Here was purpose. Here was identity. Here, finally, was home. "I realized that what I was doing in high school plays, it wasn't just an extracurricular activity. This was an art form, and I understood that there was a history of this art form, and that there was a technique and discipline to it, he later explained. With this realization came his first true ambition. He transferred to California State University, Sacramento to study theater, though he would never graduate. Instead, drawn by the gravitational pull of professional acting, he left college in 1977 to accept an internship at the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival, earning a meager $45 a week. That same year, his father married for a fifth time, another reminder that permanence and stability existed for Tom only within the boundaries of a stage or film set. The wounds of his childhood, the absence of his father, the constant relocations, the struggle to belong, would become the hidden wellspring of his extraordinary ability to portray vulnerable, decent men. Yet, they would also install in him a lifelong fear that, like his father before him, he too might fail at the most important role of his life, being a family man. The road from classical theater to Hollywood stardom was neither straight nor assured. After 3 seasons with the Great Lakes Festival, Hanks made the pilgrimage that countless aspiring actors before him had to New York City. In 1979, he landed his first film role, the low-budget slasher movie He Knows You're Alone. The part was forgettable, but it gave him a crucial Screen Actors Guild card. That same year brought personal commitment that would prove as unsustainable as his parents' marriage. At 23, Hanks married Samantha Lewis, born Susan Dillingham, his college sweetheart. Their son Colin arrived the following year, with daughter Elizabeth following in 1982. On the surface, Hanks appeared to be creating the stable family unit he had never experienced as a child. The reality was far more complicated. While struggling to support his young family, Hanks caught a career break that moved him to Los Angeles, landing the co-lead in the ABC television comedy Bosom Buddies. The premise was flimsy. 2 young men disguising themselves as women to secure affordable housing in a female-only apartment building, but it showcased Hanks's natural comedic timing. The show lasted only 2 seasons, but it positioned him for a bigger breakthrough. Director Ron Howard took notice of the young actor's charm and cast him opposite Daryl Hannah in 1984's Splash. As a man who falls in love with a mermaid, Hanks displayed a boyish vulnerability and romantic appeal that resonated with audiences. The film grossed over $69 million on an $11 million budget, establishing him as a bankable lead. Success followed with Bachelor Party in 1984, Volunteers in 1985, and The Money Pit in 1986, cementing Hanks's position as a reliable comedic actor. But behind the rising career trajectory lay personal turmoil. His marriage to Samantha was crumbling under the weight of his newfound fame and the unresolved childhood patterns he'd brought into adulthood. "I was looking for something I had not found as a kid," he would later reflect. "And a broken marriage meant I was sentencing my own kids to the sort of feelings I had at their age." The collision of professional ascent and personal failure created in Hanks a profound sense of unworthiness, a syndrome common among adult children of divorce. Even as films like Big in 1988 showcased his remarkable range and earned him his first Oscar nomination, he was privately confronting the realization that he had replicated his father's mistakes. In 1987, while filming Dragnet, Hanks met actress Rita Wilson. Their connection was immediate and undeniable, but it came with complications. He was still married, though separated. The divorce from Samantha was finalized in 1987, and Hanks married Wilson in 1988, beginning what would become one of Hollywood's most enduring unions. "Rita and I just looked at each other and caboing, that was that," Hanks has said. "I asked Rita if it was the real thing for her, and it just couldn't be denied." But personal happiness coincided with professional uncertainty. A string of commercial disappointments followed. The Burbs in 1989, Joe vs. the Volcano in 1990, The Bonfire of the Vanities in 1990, and Radio Flyer in 1992. Hollywood's enthusiasm cooled. Hanks, approaching his late 30s with a blended family to support, faced the prospect of a career in decline before it had truly peaked. Then came the role that would redefine everything. In 1993, Hanks starred in Philadelphia as Andrew Beckett, A lawyer with AIDS fighting wrongful termination. The part required Hanks to lose 35 pounds and delve into the physical and emotional devastation of the disease. It was a gamble for an actor known primarily for comedy, but one that paid extraordinary dividends. Hanks won the Academy Award for Best Actor, the industry's ultimate validation. I know that my work in this case is magnified by the fact that the streets of heaven are too crowded with angels, he said in his acceptance speech, acknowledging the real victims of the AIDS crisis with characteristic empathy. Just 1 year later, Hanks achieved what only Spencer Tracy and Jason Robards had before him, back-to-back Oscars for his portrayal of the title character in Forrest Gump. The film grossed $677 million worldwide and penetrated popular culture in ways few films ever have. Hanks, at 38, had ascended to the pinnacle of his profession. The next decade brought an unprecedented run of critical and commercial successes. Apollo 13 in 1995, Toy Story in 1995, Saving Private Ryan in 1995, 1998, You've Got Mail in 1998, The Green Mile in 1999, Cast Away in 2000, and Road to Perdition in 2002. His films grossed billions, his name above the title virtually guaranteed quality. He formed a production company, Playtone, giving him creative control few actors enjoy. But the relentless work exacted physical costs. During the filming of Cast Away, Hanks's dramatic weight fluctuations, he lost 50 pounds to play a man stranded on an island, then regained it when production paused to film the after-rescue scenes, may have contributed to his development of type 2 diabetes, diagnosed in 2013. I went to the doctor and he said, "You know those high blood sugar numbers you've been dealing with since you were 36? Well, you've graduated. You've got type 2 diabetes, young man," Hanks revealed. "I was heavy. You've seen me in movies. You know what I looked like. I was a total idiot." The diagnosis forced Hanks to confront his mortality in ways his characters often did on screen. The man who had portrayed so many health crises, from AIDS to being stranded in space with fluctuating oxygen levels, now faced a chronic condition of his own. Meanwhile, a more insidious cost accumulated: the burden of being America's dad, a mantle he never sought but could not escape. Each new role brought impossible expectations. Each public appearance required the performance of unimpeachable decency. The real Tom Hanks, complex, flawed human, disappeared behind the edifice of perfection the public and the industry demanded. On a gray March morning in 2020, as a bewildered world stood at the precipice of global pandemic, Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson announced from Australia that they had tested positive for COVID-19. In an instant, the abstract threat of a mysterious virus gained America's most trusted face. "We felt a bit tired, like we had colds, and some body aches," Hanks wrote on Instagram. Rita had some chills that came and went, slight fevers too. The announcement sent shockwaves through a public still unsure how seriously to take the emerging threat. If Tom Hanks, seemingly invulnerable, eternally youthful despite his 63 years, could be struck down, no one was safe. As the couple isolated in a Queensland hospital, their diagnosis became a turning point in public perception of the pandemic. For Hanks himself, the experience was a stark reminder of his own vulnerability. His type 2 diabetes placed him in a higher risk category, and though both he and Wilson recovered without serious complications, the brush with a potentially fatal virus forced a reckoning with age and mortality that would permanently alter his outlook. "Our discomfort because of the virus was pretty much done in 2 weeks. We had very different reactions, and that was odd," he later told The Guardian. "My wife lost her sense of taste and smell. She had severe nausea. She had a much higher fever than I did. I just had crippling body aches. I was very fatigued all the time, and I couldn't concentrate on anything for more than about 12 minutes. As he recovered in isolation, thousands of miles from home, headlines worldwide tracked his condition with an intensity normally reserved for heads of state. The burden of being not just a man, but a symbol, of American resilience, of celebrity vulnerability, weighed heavily on someone already confronting the limitations of aging in an industry that worships youth. In his characteristic way, Hanks attempted to use his experience for public good, donating plasma for COVID-19 research and speaking candidly about the importance of public health measures. But something had fundamentally shifted. The mortal clock, always ticking, had suddenly become audible. The years following his COVID-19 diagnosis revealed a Tom Hanks the public had rarely glimpsed, contemplative, occasionally melancholy, and increasingly aware of time's swift passage. Though he maintained his professional schedule, returning to film News of the World and voice Woody for Toy Story 4, a new vulnerability permeated his public appearances. "I'll be 65 years old in July," he told the New York Times in 2021. "There's a physical aspect to age that you just can't deny. I've broken my ass a number of times. I've had a hip replacement, and I want to go upstairs one step at a time now." The candor about physical decline coincided with an industry increasingly dominated by superhero franchises and digital effects, a landscape where Hanks's brand of humanist storytelling found less traction. Films like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood in 2019 and News of the World in 2020 earned critical praise but modest box office returns. For the first time in decades, Tom Hanks films were no longer events. This professional cooling coincided with more personal challenges. His son Chet publicly struggled with substance abuse issues and controversial behavior, creating the kind of tabloid attention the intensely private Hanks had always avoided. The contrast between Hanks's public image and his son's troubles highlighted the impossibility of perfect parenting, even for America's dad. In interviews, he began acknowledging the toll of maintaining his public persona. "There's this idea that if I just keep scrambling and working, everything's going to be all right. But you can't deal with your grief if you're going 100 miles an hour." This period also brought political polarization that complicated Hanks's position as a unifying cultural figure. His support for Democratic candidates and progressive causes, once uncontroversial for a Hollywood figure, now alienated portions of his audience in an increasingly divided America. The man who had portrayed the quintessential American hero in dozens of films found himself, for some viewers, on the wrong side of a cultural divide he had never sought to widen. Health scares continued as well. In 2023, during promotional appearances, observers noted a visible tremor in Hanks's hand that sparked speculation about Parkinson's disease, rumors his representatives firmly denied. Nevertheless, the incident underscored his increasing frailty and the cruel scrutiny that accompanies aging in the public eye. Perhaps most painful was the shifting cultural relevance of his past work. In an era of critical re-examination of film history, even beloved classics like Forrest Gump faced retrospective criticism for their handling of race, disability, and American history. The accusation that some of his most cherished work might have perpetuated harmful narratives struck at the core of Hanks's self-conception as a force for good. "We're all going through an active, alive history," he told the New York Times when asked about changing perspectives on his films. "And the great reckoning is here. I think if I made some of those films today, I'd be sure to have deeper conversations about them." By his late 60s, Hanks faced the reality that confronts all aging artists. Would he be remembered as a voice of his time or as a timeless voice? Had his work, so celebrated in its moment, made a lasting contribution to the art form he revered? Or would it, like so many careers before his, fade into nostalgic appreciation rather than continued relevance? The questions haunted him as he contemplated a future with fewer leading roles in an industry increasingly remote from the one that had embraced him 4 decades earlier. At some point, he admitted in a rare moment of public vulnerability, you have to ask yourself not what you can still do, but what you should still do. At 69, Tom Hanks has entered a phase of career and life that few Hollywood legends navigate with grace. The transition from leading man to elder statesman, from box office draw to living institution. Yet, in this autumnal period, Hanks has found new creative expressions that speak to accumulated wisdom rather than fading youth. His passion for American history, evident in productions from Band of Brothers to The Pacific, has deepened into a more personal engagement. In 2022, he published his first novel, The Making of Another Major Motion Picture Masterpiece, a sprawling tale spanning decades of American cinema. The book, while receiving mixed reviews, revealed Hanks's desire to be known as more than an actor, as a chronicler of the art form that defined his life. "I've seen the way movies are made from every angle," he said upon the book's release. "I've been in some great ones and some terrible ones. I wanted to capture that full experience, the collaboration, the accidents, the egos, the triumphs." His famous typewriter collection, once an eccentric hobby, has evolved into a symbol of his attachment to analog craftsmanship in a digital age. When asked why he maintains hundreds of manual typing machines, he responds with characteristic thoughtfulness. "They're objets d'art, they're tactile sculptures, and they still work." The greatest shift, however, has been toward family, a reflection perhaps of his determination to heal the wounds of his own childhood by being the father and grandfather he never had. Despite the pressures of fame, his marriage to Rita Wilson has endured for 36 years, a remarkable achievement in Hollywood terms. Their two sons, Chet and Truman, have joined Colin and Elizabeth from his first marriage in giving Hanks the family stability he craved. "The most important thing that's ever happened to me was meeting and marrying Rita Wilson," Hanks stated flatly in 2022. "Everything else is kind of secondary to that." Health remains a concern, with his diabetes requiring constant management. Yet he has approached this challenge with characteristic diligence, significantly altering his diet and exercise regimen. "I'm part of the lazy American generation that has blindly kept dancing through the party and now finds ourselves with a malady," he said of his condition. "I was heavy. You've seen me in movies. You know what I looked like. I was a total idiot." His political activism has also evolved from casual endorsements to more substantial engagement. Following the contentious 2016 and 2020 elections, Hanks has become an outspoken advocate for voting rights, historical literacy, and civic engagement, using his platform to promote democratic participation across partisan lines. In 2023, he established the Thomas J. Hanks Center for American History at Ohio State University, endowing it with $5 million and donating his extensive collection of historical documents and artifacts. The center reflects his belief that understanding America's past, in all its complexity, is essential to navigating its future. "I'm at the point in life where you ask, what am I going to leave behind?" he explained at the center's dedication. "Films fade. Performances are reinterpreted, but if I can help young people connect with their history, the good, the bad, all of it, that feels worthwhile." This turn toward legacy building has coincided with a more selective approach to roles, where once he might have made 2 or 3 films annually, Hanks now typically commits to a single project each year, choosing parts that reflect the concerns of a man in his 7th decade, characters confronting obsolescence, mortality, and the search for meaning. In 2024's Here, reuniting with Forrest Gump director Robert Zemeckis, Hanks portrays a man witnessing decades of American life from a single geographic location, a meditation on time's passage that resonates with his current perspective. "At this point," he said of the film, "I'm interested in stories about how we endure, not just how we succeed." Perhaps the most poignant aspect of Hanks's late career is his willingness to acknowledge frailty, both physical and emotional. Where once he projected unassailable competence, he now speaks openly about limitations. "When you're young, you think, 'I'm going to conquer the world,'" he reflected in a 2023 interview. "When you're my age, you start to realize the world will go on quite nicely without you. The question becomes, what do I do with the time I have?" For Tom Hanks, the answer seems to be a deliberate cultivation of meaning over acclaim, of substance over appearance. The tragedy, if there is one, lies not in any dramatic downfall, but in the universal human condition he has portrayed so effectively throughout his career: the brevity of life, the inevitability of loss, and the courage required to face both with dignity. "What I've learned," he said on his 68th birthday, "is that the most important thing in life isn't fame, isn't money, isn't even achievement. It's the struggle to be a decent human being. Some days you succeed, some days you fail miserably, but you keep trying. That's all any of us can do." As evening falls in his Pacific Palisades home, Tom Hanks runs his fingers across the keys of his favorite 1940 Remington typewriter. At 69, his face maps a journey few could have predicted for the awkward boy from Concord, California. The typewriter's keys, like the man himself, bear the impressions of countless stories told, of truths explored, of time's relentless march. The tragedy of Tom Hanks isn't found in scandal or spectacular failure. It lies in something far more universal, the poignant reality that even our most beloved cultural icons must eventually confront obsolescence. The man who embodied American optimism through characters like Forrest Gump and Captain Miller now stands as a bridge between Hollywood's golden age and whatever comes next, a living reminder of what storytelling can achieve when it prioritizes humanity over spectacle. If this journey through Tom Hanks's life has moved you, please consider sharing it with someone who might appreciate his example of resilience and authenticity. Everything helps others discover stories that remind us of our common humanity. Which moment in Tom Hanks's journey resonates most deeply with you? The boy who found himself through acting? The young father who failed at his first marriage but refused to repeat history? The artist who risked comfort to play challenging roles? Or perhaps the elder statesman, confronting mortality while still creating work that matters? In the end, perhaps Tom Hanks's greatest role has been simply being himself, a man who, despite the artifice inherent in his profession, has maintained a core of genuine decency. In an industry built on illusion, that may be the most remarkable achievement of all.